Japan has over 1,300 years of documented food culture, and yet fewer than 5% of people outside Japan understand even the most basic principles that govern how Japanese people actually think about food. Not just what they eat, but why, when, how, and with whom. That gap between surface knowledge and real understanding is enormous. And today, we are going to close it completely. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover how Japanese food culture developed over more than a millennium, why it is fundamentally different from every other major food tradition on Earth, and the one principle that quietly governs every Japanese meal, from a convenience store rice ball to a 17-course kaiseki dinner. Most food documentaries skip right past this principle because it seems too simple. But once you understand it, you will never look at Japanese food the same way again. Japan is an island nation, and that geography shaped everything. Surrounded by ocean on all sides, cut off from easy continental trade, the Japanese people developed a food culture that was forced to become extraordinarily resourceful and deeply intentional. The earliest recorded Japanese food practices date back to the Jomon period, roughly 14,000 years ago, when people were already fermenting food, harvesting seafood, and developing preservation techniques. But the framework that defines modern Japanese food culture largely took shape during the Nara and Heian periods, between roughly 710 and 1185 CE. During this era, Buddhism arrived in Japan from China and Korea, and with it came one of the most consequential dietary shifts in Japanese history. Emperor Tenmu issued an official ban on the consumption of meat from cattle, horses, dogs, monkeys, and chickens in 675 CE. This decree was not just religious, it was cultural programming that lasted for over 1,000 years. For more than 12 centuries, Japanese cuisine evolved almost entirely without red meat as a central ingredient. That is not a footnote. That is the entire structural foundation of why Japanese food looks, tastes, and functions the way it does. Instead of building flavor around animal fat and protein the way European cuisines did, Japanese cooks built their flavor systems around umami, the fifth taste, first scientifically identified by Japanese chemist Kikuchi Ikeda in 1908. Ikeda isolated glutamate from kombu seaweed and recognized it as a distinct flavor category. But Japanese cooks had been working with this flavor for centuries before it had a scientific name. Dashi, the foundational broth made from kombu and dried bonito flakes, is essentially a pure umami delivery system. It is the invisible backbone of Japanese cooking in the same way that stock is the backbone of French cuisine. But here's what nobody talks about: dashi is not the most interesting part of this story. The most interesting part is what dashi represents philosophically. Japanese food culture operates on a principle called ma, which translates roughly as negative space or meaningful emptiness. In food terms, this means that restraint is considered a form of mastery. A Japanese chef who uses 12 ingredients where 5 would do is not being creative, they are being undisciplined. The goal is always to do less, better. That philosophy of intentional subtraction is what makes Japanese cuisine so difficult to replicate and so easy to misunderstand. The structure of a traditional Japanese meal reflects this philosophy at every level. The classic format is called a chiju sansai, which means 1 soup and 3 sides. A bowl of steamed rice, a bowl of miso soup, 1 main dish, and 2 small side dishes. That is the entire framework. No elaborate presentation, no theatrical excess. The meal is balanced nutritionally, visually, and in terms of flavor, but the balance is achieved through simplicity, not complexity. Studies of traditional Japanese rural diets have found that this format naturally produces meals averaging around 400 to 600 calories while still delivering complete nutritional profiles. That is not an accident. That is 1,000 years of culinary refinement. Seasonality is the other foundational pillar of Japanese food culture, and it operates at a level of specificity that most Western food cultures simply do not match. The Japanese concept of shun refers to the peak moment of a seasonal ingredient, not just the season, but the precise window of days or weeks when a specific food is at its absolute best. A Japanese chef does not just think in terms of spring vegetables. They think about which week of spring. Cherry blossoms are not just beautiful to look at in Japan, they are edible, they are seasonal markers, and their appearance signals that certain fish and shellfish are entering their best period. The entire food calendar is interlocked with the natural calendar in ways that have been refined across generations. This connection to seasonality is not nostalgic or decorative. Research published by the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture has consistently shown that seasonal eating patterns in Japan correlate directly with the country's nutritional health outcomes. Japan has one of the lowest obesity rates among developed nations, approximately 4% of adults compared to over 40% in the United States. While diet is only one factor among many, food culture researchers at institutions including Kyoto University have identified the principle of hara hachi bu, eating until you are 80% full, as a measurable behavioral practice among older Japanese populations, particularly in Okinawa, which has historically had one of the highest concentrations of centenarians on Earth. What makes Japanese food culture truly advanced is how it has maintained cultural continuity while absorbing outside influences without losing its identity. When Portugal introduced tempura batter frying techniques to Japan in the 16th century, Japanese cooks adapted the technique but stripped it down to match their own aesthetic: a lighter batter, a shorter fry time, a cleaner result. When Western food arrived en masse during the Meiji period after 1868, Japan created an entirely new category called yoshoku, Japanese-style Western food, that transformed beef stew into hayashi rice, transformed breaded cutlets into tonkatsu, and transformed curry into a thick, sweet, deeply Japanese dish that has almost nothing in common with its South Asian origins. Japan did not just borrow these foods. It philosophically rebuilt them from the inside out. The role of fermentation in Japanese food culture deserves its own examination because it is the hidden engine of the entire system. Miso, soy sauce, sake, mirin, rice vinegar, sukmono pickles, natto, these fermented products are not additions to Japanese cuisine. They are the infrastructure. The fermentation tradition in Japan dates back over 2,000 years and was originally tied to rice cultivation. As rice became the dominant crop and the central unit of economic exchange, feudal lords were literally paid in rice for centuries. The byproducts of rice production became the flavor foundations of the entire cuisine. Sake lees, rice bran, koji mold, all of these were transformed into flavor agents that now define Japanese taste at the most fundamental level. Koji mold, specifically Aspergillus oryzae, is arguably the single most important ingredient in Japanese food culture that almost nobody outside Japan knows by name. It is the organism responsible for fermenting miso, soy sauce, sake, and mirin. Without koji, Japanese cuisine as we know it does not exist. In recent years, Western chefs including René Redzepi at Noma have begun experimenting with koji fermentation specifically because of its extraordinary ability to create depth of flavor and umami without added salt or fat. Japanese cooks have known this for 2,000 years. The presentation philosophy in Japanese food, called moritsuke, is another layer of the same underlying principle. Plates and bowls are rarely filled completely. Negative space is intentional. Odd numbers are preferred over even numbers in arrangements. The goal is to suggest abundance through restraint, to create a visual experience that feels like nature rather than industry. These are not arbitrary rules. They are expressions of the same aesthetic consciousness that governs Japanese architecture, poetry, and garden design. The food and the culture are not separate things. They are the same thing expressed in different materials. Understanding Japanese food culture means understanding that every element, the dashi, the seasonal calendar, the fermented foundations, the philosophy of subtraction, points back to the same core idea. Food is not entertainment. Food is practice. It is a daily act of attention and respect toward ingredients, toward the people eating, and toward the natural systems that make eating possible at all. That is the principle most food documentaries skip over. And it is the reason why Japanese food culture, after more than 1,000 years, still has the capacity to surprise and teach anyone willing to pay close attention. Before you go, if you learned something new today, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe to Flavor Vault for a new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.